Okay, I want to talk about something that I've done a lot of thinking about as I've been on the run and all of the horrific things that have happened to me. And let's bring in the idea of thought experiment again, okay? So let's continue with the thought experiment that I brought up a few videos back, that we know, like roughly 10,000 years ago, people started hearing voices that told them they were God, right? And eventually they made it that those stories and those conversations made it into the Torah, the Jewish holy book. And there are several, of course, origin stories about humanity in those books. All of them completely wrong, right? We evolved from primates. That's how humanity came to exist. The evidence is overwhelming, right? Because you have to look at evidence. Otherwise, you're insane and you're easy to manipulate, right? So we have to look at real world evidence. But the stories in this book, of course, there's actually several origin stories. And the most famous one is Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And I don't know a single Jew who looks at that story and is like, yeah, that's what happened. You're being brainwashed and manipulated if you believe that that's how humanity began, that there was an actual Garden of Eden. No, we evolved from primates. And if you're a Christian, you have appropriated the Jewish holy book, and you're being taught nonsense about it, because no Jew believes that actually happened. We evolved. That's what actually happened. And you're being manipulated. If you're a Christian, they stole our holy book, and then they're using that to manipulate you as a Christian. So just try to get past that. Christianity is evil. Anyway, and so let's talk about the story of because a lot of people do believe that this was the beginning. And like, even if you don't believe that that's the actual way that humanity began, it's still a very pivotal story in sort of how we perceive ourselves. Everybody knows, right, the Adam and Eve story. And that's important. So let's just go on with this thought experiment. Like, what if that was a first encounter with something else, right? And they were trying, let's just come with me here on this thought experiment, okay? And they're trying to, whoever it was trying to put humanity in a box and pretend a lot of things. Because, I mean, it's a big lie, right? I mean, the Garden of Eden story is just a lie. There's so many lies around that story. And some of them are even within the story, obviously within the story. So let's talk about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So if you don't know the story, if you don't know this origin story, there might be people who don't know. But if you don't know the origin story, what happened was God created, the whole earth, and then he created man, which was Adam. And then he took a rib out of Adam's side and used that to create woman, who was Eve. And then he put them in this Garden of Eden. And so it was just supposed to be beautiful and easy. And like, if you wanted fruit, you reached up and got fruit. Like, you didn't have to do anything. You just ate and drank water, and Adam and Eve were there. And but there was a caveat. There was a caveat to this. Within this Garden of Eden were two magical trees. Some people believe this story is real. Anyway, but two magical trees, right? One was the tree of life, and one was the tree of good and evil, of knowledge, of good and evil. And they're just in the garden with everything else, these two trees. And the God of that story, is not my God, the God of that story told Adam and Eve that they couldn't eat from those two trees, these two magical, like, you couldn't eat from the tree of life why wouldn't you eat from the tree of life? But no, you can't eat from the tree of life, and you can't eat from the tree of knowledge, which is, good and evil. But everything else is okay. So let's talk a bit about humanity. Like, one of the hallmarks of humanity is, I've said this before, is our long, long childhood, right? You don't become, your brain is not fully grown until you're like 25 or 30. So this God had just created Adam and Eve. And like, if you're looking at sort of the conversation level of Adam and Eve, they're clearly like young. They're like 5, maybe. Like they've really just learned how to speak. So they're not fully grown, right? I mean, that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of focus, right? And like at the beginning of the story, we just see Adam and Eve. They're all by themselves in the Garden of Eden. There's no parent around. There's no one there to nurture them and guide them and give them so much attention that little human beings need. We need so much attention from our caregiver. Where's the mom in this story? Where's the mom? Who knows this, right? Like, I've talked to people trying to help them see a little clearer, and I've said to them, this, what reminds me of it, when my kids were really little and just like pre-verbal, my ex-husband had no idea how to deal with them and would often lose his temper because, they weren't little, they weren't just adults in small size, right? They're growing brains, they're toddlers, or they're, very little. They aren't capable of thinking like an adult. But like, he didn't grasp that. And he would often lose his temper with these little, people. But they were children. And he just would get so angry when they wouldn't follow his instructions or obey him. And I would be like, Ben, they're kids. They don't have fully developed brains. That's what we're working on. That's what I'm working on with them, developing their brains. But they're a long way from being an adult. You can't talk to them like an adult and expect them to know how to respond. They're not rational. They're pre-rational. He was kind of pre-rational too, but he didn't know that. So let's go over the story. So Adam and Eve, so they're little kids. They're obviously little kids. It takes 25, 30 years of intensive parenting to raise a human being. That's just the hallmark of a human being. So that didn't happen here, right? So they're little kids, and Eve. Oh, and I want to say too that this story has been called by these really stupid, easily manipulated Christians the fall of man. The fall of man. And if you ask me what the real title of this story is, it's the heroism of this little girl, Eve. She was the courageous hero in this story. So there's a snake in the garden, and he came to little Eve, and he said, Eve, honey bunch, you should try one of the apples in that tree. And Eve said, oh no. Dad told me that if I ate the apple, I would die. That was his idea, I guess, for keeping them off these trees. You can't keep a toddler away from something by telling them they're going to die. I used to have a toddler that kept trying to loved fire so much, he kept trying to get into the fire, right? And no amount of telling him, don't go into the fire, you're going to die, would have changed. He just couldn't process that. Anyway, so the God in the story, it has no fucking clue how to handle children, right? How to handle these two human children. So this snake gets into the garden, and he goes to Eve, and he says, you should have, just bite one of those apples. And Dad said I'd die. And then the snake's like, no, you're not going to die. Just try it. It's delicious. Or something like that. And Eve's like, okay. She's a kid. Because she's a human being, right? We're curious. Kids get into everything. And so she goes and she takes a bite of the apple. She's like, yeah, it's good. And she brought it back to Adam and gave him, the apple to try. And he took a bite and was like, yeah, all right. And then And then the absent father, where the fuck is he with these little kids? He's just leaving them alone. The absent father comes storming angrily to them. He's like, what are you doing? To Adam. He's not going to even talk to Eve, right? Because she's a girl. He talks to Adam. Adam, what are you doing? I told you not to eat that apple. Because he caught Adam, eating the apple. Adam's, slowly, trying to hide the apple. And then Adam says, as kids do, it wasn't me, it's her. It was her. She did it. Now, if any mother was present there, she'd start laughing and she'd blame herself because, of course, if you don't want little kids, little human beings, to get into something, you put up a toddler gate. That's how you prevent kids from getting into shit, because they don't have the ability to just, respond to instructions, rational instructions. They can't do that. So you have to put up a toddler gate if you don't want kids getting into shit. But this dumb motherfucker, nasty sack of shit, God, in this book, in this story, starts, loses his temper. He tells Eve, you're going to have children, you're going to die in childbirth, you're going to be in agony because you took that apple. And he tells Adam, you're going to be a gardener for the rest of your life. You're going to, hoe the land and whatever. Again, right, the misogyny. The just horrific misogyny in that response. And that's not the reason we struggle in labor. That has nothing to do with why we struggle in labor, and why there's always been so much trouble. It is very hard for women, for human beings to give birth, for women to give birth. But that's about physics. It's because we have such big brains, right? I mean, that's the reason. And this narcissistic, nasty, despicable, violent, and from my perspective, sociopathic God just responded to these kids as if they were adults, lashed out at them in the most horrific way, and then, left Eden or whatever, left them alone. The fall of man, it's so insane. It's so insane that and let's think about this too, right? This nasty, lying, sociopathic God, because he told these two kids that if they had the apple, they would die. And he was lying, right? Totally lying. Because the snakes, who was actually telling the truth, said, no, you can have an apple, you're not going to die. And they didn't, of course, they didn't die. And then I think, too, okay, let's just presume that these trees, these magical trees, were actually the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. And poor Eve, right, she's surrounded by this bratty little boy and this horrific sociopath, girl-hating father, right? I mean, she was caught between a rock and a hard place. So she took the risk that really she had to take. Okay, I'm stuck here. I'm trapped here. I've got to do something to get the fuck out of this shit. And, that's what she did. And good for her. Eve, you go, girl, man. Let us all be Eves. Not that nasty sociopathic God. And, Adam, he was just kind of a blah. Really, it was Eve that shone in that story.